In a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, 15-year-old James Carter sat at the kitchen table, head bent over his homework. The wall clock ticked steadily as his mother, Lisa, stirred a pot of her famous chicken stew. The rich smell filled their modest two-bedroom home, a home that had always been just the two of them for as long as James could remember. "You need any help with that math?" Lisa asked, wiping her hands on her apron as she peeked over his shoulder. James shook his head, pencil moving confidently across the page. "I got it, Mom. Mr. Thompson showed us a new way to solve these equations." Lisa smiled, a hint of pride and sadness mingling in her eyes. James had always been quick with numbers, just like his father. Not that James would know that. The thought of Malcolm brought a familiar ache to her chest. The only trace of Malcolm Carter in their home was a faded photograph tucked into James's bedside drawer. In it, a younger version of his mother stood beaming beside a tall, handsome man with James's same warm brown eyes and dimpled smile. James would sometimes take out the photo when his mother wasn't looking, studying the stranger who had helped bring him into the world but hadn't stayed to watch him grow. "Mom," James had asked once when he was about 9, "why did Dad leave?" "Was it because of me?" Lisa had pulled him close that day, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "Never think that, baby. Your father left because he had big dreams. He wanted to give us the world, but sometimes people take different paths to get where they're going." What she didn't tell James was how Malcolm had kissed her goodbye one rainy Tuesday, promising to build something that would secure their future. 2 years, he had said. "Give me 2 years to make this work." But 2 years had turned into 5, then 10, and now 13. The child support checks arrived regularly through a lawyer, but the man himself never returned. Later that evening, as James helped dry the dishes, the local news played softly on their small TV in the corner of the living room. "Breaking business news tonight," the announcer said. "Carter Airways announces new international routes, making it the fastest-growing black-owned airline in American history." Neither James nor Lisa paid attention to the brief segment. James was thinking about the basketball game scheduled for Friday, while Lisa was mentally reviewing her work schedule for the coming week. The hospital where she worked as a nurse was short-staffed again, which meant extra shifts and overtime pay they could use for James's college fund. That night, as James got ready for bed, he noticed the edge of the photograph peeking out from his drawer. He picked it up, studying his father's face in the dim light of his bedside lamp. "Who were you?" he whispered to the silent image. Sometimes James imagined his father as a musician, traveling the world with a band. Other times, he pictured him as a doctor in some faraway country, saving lives. The truth was, he knew almost nothing about the man except what little his mother had shared over the years. What James couldn't know was that at that exact moment, hundreds of miles away in a penthouse office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Malcolm Carter was looking at his own copy of the same photograph. Unlike James's one print, Malcolm's was framed in simple silver, positioned prominently on his otherwise minimalist desk. Malcolm ran his finger over the image of the small boy he had last held when tiny fingers could barely wrap around his thumb. Now that boy was 15, growing into a young man without his guidance. The thought had been keeping him awake at night more and more frequently. "It's time," Malcolm said to the empty office. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant, though it was well past business hours. "Book 2 first-class tickets from Chicago to New York for next Friday," he instructed, for Lisa and James Carter. What Malcolm Carter couldn't predict was how one gate agent's prejudice would turn his carefully planned reunion into something neither he nor his son would ever forget. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as Malcolm Carter stood looking out at the Manhattan skyline. 50 stories below, the city was already buzzing with energy, but up here in his penthouse office, there was only the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ping of his phone. Malcolm loosened his tie slightly, feeling the weight of the day ahead. At 45, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had fought for everything he had. His close-cropped hair now showed touches of gray at the temples, adding to his distinguished appearance in the perfectly tailored navy suit. "Mr. Carter, your 9 o'clock is waiting," his assistant, Diane Washington, announced through the intercom. Malcolm sighed, turning from the window. "Give me 5 minutes, please." He walked to his desk, eyes landing on the silver-framed photograph he'd been staring at last night. Lisa's smile and little James's curious eyes looked back at him. He picked it up, his thumb brushing over the glass. 13 years. He'd meant to go back after 2. Just 2 years to get the business off the ground, to prove he could create something lasting. He remembered that rainy day when he'd kissed Lisa goodbye, promised to build a future for them. He'd started with one small plane, offering charter flights to business people who couldn't afford private jets but wanted to avoid commercial hassles. The memories came rushing back, sleeping in airport lounges to save money, eating cold sandwiches while reviewing flight plans, learning every aspect of the aviation business from the ground up. Those early years had been brutal, with banks refusing loans, investors questioning whether a black man could succeed in the industry, and competitors spreading rumors to drive away his clients. His phone buzzed again. Malcolm placed the photo back on his desk and pressed the intercom. Send them in. The next few hours passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and problems to solve. Qatar Airways now employed over 5,000 people, operated 67 aircraft, and served 23 countries. The upcoming expansion would add another 12 international routes, making it one of the most successful independent airlines in the country. Around noon, Diane brought in a stack of reports that needed his signature. As she placed them on his desk, her eyes fell on the photograph. "They look happy," she said quietly. Malcolm nodded. Diane was one of the few people who knew about Lisa and James. She'd been with him almost from the beginning, rising from administrative assistant to vice president of customer experience. "I've waited too long, Diane," Malcolm admitted. "Every year I told myself just one more milestone, one more achievement, then I'll go back. But there was always something else to accomplish first." Diane sat down across from him. "What changed?" Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "I saw him last month when I was in Chicago for the airport contract negotiation. I drove by their neighborhood and saw him playing basketball in the park. He's so tall now, his voice caught, so grown up. I missed it all." "It's not too late," Diane said gently. "I hope not." Malcolm pulled out his phone, showing her the confirmation for the 2 first-class tickets he booked. "They're coming next Friday. Lisa knows we've been talking about this for weeks, but James doesn't. I want to surprise him." Diane smiled. "That's wonderful. Do you want me to arrange anything special for their arrival?" Malcolm shook his head. "No. I want them treated like any other passengers, no special treatment from the staff. I want James to see the airline as it really is before he knows it's connected to me." Later that afternoon, Malcolm called the architect designing the new Qatar Airways headquarters. "I want to make a change to the plans," he said. "Move the youth education center from the back of the building to the front and double its size. And add a flight simulator, a good one." The architect agreed, making notes. "One more thing," Malcolm added. "Change the name from Qatar Aviation Academy to James Qatar Aviation Academy." After hanging up, Malcolm walked back to the window, watching planes leave vapor trails across the blue sky. For 13 years he'd built an empire, but the most important thing, his family, had been left behind. He told himself it was all for them, but he'd never given them the choice to be part of it. "Not anymore," he whispered to himself as a Qatar Airways plane climbed into the sky below. "It's time to come home." Lisa Carter stood in her bedroom, staring at the open suitcase on her bed. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded a blouse and placed it carefully inside. After all these years, she was finally going to see Malcolm again, and James would meet his father for the first time since he was a toddler. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Malcolm, everything set for tomorrow. Car will pick you up at 9 a.m. How's James feeling about the trip?" Lisa smiled, typing back, excited but nervous. "He's never flown before. Still thinks this is just a weekend getaway I won at work." She hadn't told James the truth. How could she explain that his father, who had been absent for most of his life, was now a wealthy airline owner who wanted to reconnect? It sounded unbelievable even to her, and she'd been secretly in touch with Malcolm for the past month. It had started with a simple email that arrived in her inbox 4 weeks ago. "It's time," was all it said, with a phone number below. She'd recognized Malcolm's old email address immediately. Her heart had raced as she dialed the number, not knowing what to expect. "Hello, Lisa," he'd said, his voice deeper than she remembered, but still unmistakably his. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please hear me out. They talked for hours that first night, Malcolm explaining how his small charter business had grown beyond anything he imagined, how each success had led to another opportunity he couldn't turn down, how years had slipped by as he built something he believed would make them proud. Lisa had listened, part of her angry at the lost years, another part understanding his drive to create something meaningful. I want to meet him, Lisa, Malcolm had said finally. I want to be part of his life, if he'll let me. Now, after weeks of planning, tomorrow was the day. Malcolm had arranged everything: first-class tickets on his premier international flight, a luxury hotel in New York, a car service. Lisa closed the suitcase and zipped it shut, her mind racing with questions and doubts. In the living room, James was watching a YouTube video about New York City, making a list of places he wanted to visit. Mom, did you know the Empire State Building has 1,576 steps? Some people race all the way to the top, he called out as she entered the room. Lisa smiled, sitting beside him on the couch. Are you planning to race up? James laughed. No way. I'll take the elevator like a normal person. He turned to her, excitement in his eyes. I still can't believe we're going to New York. How exactly did you win these tickets again? Lisa felt the familiar twinge of guilt at the lie. Just a hospital raffle. Lucky draw. She changed the subject quickly. Have you packed your toothbrush? And the new outfit we bought? James nodded, then grew serious. Mom, is everything okay? You've been acting weird all week. Lisa took a deep breath. I'm just excited for you to see New York. It's going to be a special trip. More special than you're telling me, James said, his perceptive eyes studying her face. There's something you're not saying. Lisa reached out and squeezed his hand. Let's just say, there might be a surprise waiting in New York. A good one, I hope. Later that night, after James had gone to bed, Lisa stood in the doorway of his room, watching him sleep. Her mind drifted to memories of Malcolm holding baby James, the pride in his eyes as he'd rocked their son to sleep. She remembered his promises, his dreams, the way he'd talked about giving their child everything they hadn't had growing up. In some ways, he kept that promise. The child support had always been more than generous, ensuring James never went without necessities. But money couldn't replace a father's presence. Her phone lit up with another text from Malcolm, nervous about tomorrow. What if he hates me? Lisa typed back slowly. He has your smile, your laugh, your way of seeing the world. Give him time. He has your heart too. She put her phone down and whispered a quiet prayer that tomorrow would go smoothly. That the reunion she'd both longed for and dreaded would heal old wounds rather than create new ones. That her son would find in his father someone worth knowing, despite the years of absence. What Lisa couldn't know was that the carefully planned reunion was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would reveal painful truths about the world her son was entering. The airport buzzed with morning activity as James and his mother made their way through the crowded terminal. James had never seen so many people rushing in different directions, their rolling suitcases creating a constant background rumble on the polished floors. You okay? Lisa asked, noticing James's wide eyes as he took everything in. Yeah, he nodded, adjusting his backpack, just bigger than I expected. James wore his favorite jeans and a plain blue hoodie, comfortable clothes for his first ever flight. Lisa had suggested he wear something nicer, but James had insisted he wanted to be comfortable. Now, surrounded by business travelers in suits and smart casual outfits, he felt slightly underdressed but didn't really care. They'd followed the signs to the check-in area for Qatar Airways, joining the line for first-class passengers. James fidgeted with his phone, scrolling through photos of New York attractions while they waited. Good morning, the gate agent greeted when they reached the counter. Her smile faltered slightly as she looked at James in his casual clothes, then back at their booking information on her screen. You're checking in for first class to New York? Yes, Lisa handed over their IDs. We have a 10:30 flight. The agent's fingers tapped at her keyboard, her expression growing more doubtful. And how did you book these tickets, ma'am? Lisa's back straightened. They were arranged for us. Is there a problem? Not exactly, the agent said, her voice taking on a condescending tone. It's just that first class has certain standards. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in economy. I could arrange that for you. James looked between his mother and the agent, confusion spreading across his face as he realized what was happening. The agent wasn't looking at him as a first-class passenger. She was looking at him as someone who didn't belong there. "Our tickets are for first class," Lisa said firmly, her nurse's voice coming through, the one she used when doctors tried to dismiss her concerns about patients. "We'd like to be seated as booked." The agent's smile tightened. "Of course. I just need to verify the booking. If you could step aside for a moment." She gestured to a waiting area, then picked up her phone, speaking quietly into it. James leaned closer to his mom. "What's going on?" he whispered. "Nothing you need to worry about," Lisa replied, but James could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers gripped her purse strap too tightly. A young couple behind them in line was quickly processed and directed to the first-class lounge, the agent's smile returning to full wattage. James noticed the man wearing jeans not much different from his own, though paired with an expensive-looking jacket. After several minutes, a man in a Qatar Airways uniform approached them. "Is there a problem here?" he asked the agent before turning to Lisa and James. "These passengers are booked in first class, but I'm not sure if the reservation is valid," the agent explained. "The booking was made through an unusual channel." "I see," the manager said, studying his tablet. "And what seems unusual about it?" The agent lowered her voice, but not enough that James couldn't hear. "They don't seem like our typical first-class demographic. I think there might have been a mistake." James felt his face grow hot with embarrassment as other passengers glanced over. He wanted to disappear, to be anywhere but standing there being judged. In that moment, he wished they'd never won those tickets, never decided to come to New York at all. "Mom," he said quietly, "it's fine. We can just go in economy." Lisa put her arm around his shoulders. "No, honey, we're going to sit where we're supposed to sit." The manager looked uncomfortable now, caught between the agent's concerns and what was clearly becoming a scene. "Perhaps we could step over to the service desk to sort this out," he suggested, gesturing toward a quieter area away from the line. As they moved away from the counter, James caught snippets of whispers from people in line. His shoulders hunched as he tried to make himself smaller, invisible. At the service desk, the manager began tapping on another computer. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. Let me check your reservation details again." Lisa's voice was calm but steel-edged. "My son and I have valid tickets for first class. The only unusual thing here is that we're being questioned about it while others are not." The manager had the decency to look embarrassed. "I understand your frustration, Ms. Carter. It's just a verification issue with how the tickets were purchased." "The tickets were a gift," Lisa said, not wanting to reveal more. As the conversation continued, James drifted a few steps away, pretending to be interested in a display of model airplanes. His excitement about the trip had evaporated, replaced by a burning sense of shame and anger. He'd experienced moments like this before, store security following him for no reason, teachers expressing surprise when he did well on tests, but never so publicly, never with his mother being embarrassed alongside him. He stared at a model of a Qatar Airways plane, noting the company's slogan painted on its side. "The sky belongs to everyone." The irony wasn't lost on him. What James couldn't know was that across the terminal, Diane Washington, the airline's vice president of customer experience, had just arrived for a routine visit. And she was about to change everything about this situation. Diane Washington strode through the terminal with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor. At 52, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through years of hard work. Her quarterly surprise visits to different airports were legendary among Qatar Airways staff, sometimes resulting in promotions, sometimes in difficult conversations about company values. Today was supposed to be a routine check. That changed the moment she rounded the corner and saw Lisa Carter standing at the service desk, her son looking miserable beside her. Diane froze. She knew exactly who they were from the photographs on Malcolm's desk. This was his family, the family he'd been planning to reunite with today in New York. And from the looks of things, their journey wasn't starting well. She approached quickly, catching the end of the manager's explanation. "Just need to verify the payment method, and then we can." "Excuse me," Diane interrupted, her voice pleasant but authoritative. "What seems to be the issue here?" The manager turned, recognition flashing across his face. "Ms. Washington, I didn't know you were visiting today." Clearly, Diane said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She turned to Lisa and James. "I'm Diane Washington, Vice President of Customer Experience for Qatar Airways. May I ask what's happening?" Before Lisa could answer, the manager jumped in. "Just a routine verification. The booking came through an unusual channel, and—" "My son and I have first-class tickets," Lisa cut in, her patience visibly wearing thin. "But apparently we don't look like we belong there." Diane's expression darkened as she understood. She built her career fighting exactly this kind of bias. She turned to the manager, her voice low. "Pull up their reservation details. Now." The manager hurriedly tapped at his keyboard. "Qatar, Lisa and James. First class to New York." The tickets were purchased directly by. His eyes widened as he saw the name. "Oh? Oh, indeed," Diane said coldly. She turned back to Lisa with a genuine smile. "Miss Carter, I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. Your tickets were arranged by a very important person at our airline." She was careful not to reveal Malcolm's connection, knowing it wasn't her place to do so. James looked up, curious now. "What do you mean?" Diane winked at him. "Let's just say you two are VIPs today. In fact," she continued, making a quick decision, "I'd like to upgrade you to our chairman's suite. It's normally reserved for our executives." The manager's jaw dropped. "But Ms. Washington, that's—" "The least we can do," Diane finished firmly. She turned to the original gate agent who had been called over. "Please escort Ms. Carter and her son to the executive lounge immediately, and inform the flight crew that they'll be in the chairman's suite." The agent, now realizing the gravity of her mistake, nodded quickly. "Right away, Ms. Washington." As the agent took their boarding passes and began reprogramming them, Diane pulled Lisa slightly aside. "I am truly sorry for what happened," she said quietly. "This isn't what Qatar Airways stands for." Lisa studied her face. "You know, don't you?" "About Malcolm." Diane nodded slightly. "I've worked with him for almost 12 years. He's a good man who's made some complicated choices." "That's one way to put it," Lisa replied, but there was no bitterness in her voice, just a weary acceptance. "He's been looking forward to this day for weeks," Diane said. "Please don't let this incident cloud your trip." Lisa's eyes softened. "It's not your fault, and it's hardly the first time we've experienced something like this." She glanced at James, who was now being treated like royalty by the formerly dismissive agent. "But I appreciate you stepping in." The agent returned with their new boarding passes. "Everything is set. If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to the lounge." James rejoined his mother, looking confused but relieved. "Mom, what's happening?" "They're giving us some special suite now." "Apparently we have a friend at the airline," Lisa said, exchanging a knowing look with Diane. As they prepared to follow the agent, Diane touched James's shoulder. "I hope you enjoy your first flight, James. Qatar Airways is lucky to have you on board today." James smiled, his earlier embarrassment fading. "Thanks for helping us." "One more thing," Diane said, making another quick decision. She pulled a business card from her jacket and wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal cell. If you need anything at all during your stay in New York, please call me." Lisa accepted the card with a questioning look. "Just in case," Diane said meaningfully. As they walked away, Diane turned her attention to the manager and gate agent. Her smile disappeared. "My office." "Now," she said quietly, "we need to have a serious conversation about Qatar Airways values." While they headed toward an empty conference room, Diane sent a quick text to Malcolm. "They're here. There was an incident at check-in. Handled now, but you should know about it before they arrive." Malcolm's response came seconds later. "What happened? Are they ok?" Diane typed carefully. "They're fine." James was questioned about belonging in first class. "I've upgraded them to the chairman's suite. We'll talk more later." She put her phone away, preparing for the difficult conversation ahead with her staff. Malcolm had built this airline with a vision of inclusion and respect. What happened today violated everything he stood for, and on today of all days, with his own son. The irony wasn't lost on her as she glanced back to see James and Lisa being escorted like royalty toward the lounge. The boy had no idea that the airline that had first questioned his place was about to become a significant part of his life story. James had never experienced anything like the chairman's suite on the Qatar Airways flight. The spacious cabin contained just 2 wide seats that transformed into flat beds, a small dining table, and even a private bathroom. The flight attendant, a friendly woman named Rita, seemed determined to make up for their earlier treatment. "Can I get you anything to drink before takeoff?" she asked, offering a menu of options James had never heard of. "Just water is fine," James said, still feeling slightly out of place despite the luxury. "And for you, Ms. Carter?" Rita asked his mother. "The same, thank you," Lisa replied, settling into her seat. As Rita moved to the galley to prepare their drinks, James whispered to his mom, "What happened back there? Why are they treating us like this now?" Lisa squeezed his hand. "Sometimes people make wrong assumptions, then realize their mistake. Let's just enjoy the flight." But James noticed how the entire crew seemed especially attentive, almost nervous around them. Something was definitely strange about this trip. Once they were airborne, James became distracted by the amenities, the large screen TV, the gourmet meal service, the views from 35,000 feet. His first flying experience was nothing like he'd imagined. During the meal, James struck up a conversation with Rita as she served their food. "Have you worked for Qatar Airways long?" he asked, genuinely curious. "About 7 years," she smiled. "It's a wonderful company to work for." "What's the owner like? Is he nice?" James asked between bites of his steak. Rita paused, giving him an odd look. "Mr. Carter? He's very respected. Fair. Demanding but compassionate. He started with almost nothing and built all this." She gestured around the cabin. "His story is pretty famous in the industry." "Really? I don't know much about airlines," James admitted. Rita seemed to relax. "There's a magazine in your seat pocket with an article about the company's history, if you're interested." After she moved on, James found the magazine and began reading. The article detailed how Malcolm Carter had started with a single leased plane 15 years ago, offering charter services to business people. Despite facing industry prejudice and financial obstacles, he had slowly built his fleet, focusing on superior service and innovative technology. James was impressed. The photos showed a tall, distinguished black man in expensive suits, shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Something about his eyes looked vaguely familiar, but James couldn't place it. "Mom, check this out," he said, showing her the magazine. "The guy who owns this airline started with nothing. Kinda cool." Lisa glanced at the photo, her expression unreadable. Yes, very impressive. When they landed in New York, another surprise awaited them. Instead of deplaning with the other passengers, they were asked to wait. "Special transportation has been arranged for you," Rita explained with a smile. James raised an eyebrow at his mother. "Seriously, what is going on? Why are we getting this treatment?" Before Lisa could answer, the plane had emptied and Rita returned. "If you'll follow me, please." They were led through a private exit directly onto the tarmac where a luxury car waited. The driver opened the door, and Rita wished them a pleasant stay in New York. "Someone will meet you inside," she said, nodding toward a private terminal building. As the car pulled away from the plane, James watched his mother's hands fidget nervously in her lap. "Mom, you know something you're not telling me." Lisa took a deep breath. "James, there's someone waiting to meet us. Someone important." "Who? What's this all about?" The car stopped at the small, exclusive terminal. As they stepped out, James noticed it was reserved for private jets and VIP passengers. Inside, the space was elegantly furnished but empty except for a single man standing by the window, his back to them. He turned as they entered. Tall, with close-cropped graying hair, wearing an impeccably tailored suit, James recognized him instantly from the magazine. Malcolm Carter, owner of Qatar Airways. "What's happening?" James whispered to his mother. "Why are we meeting him?" The man stepped forward, his eyes locked not on Lisa but on James. There was an intensity in his gaze that made James stand straighter. "Hello, James," the man said, his deep voice slightly unsteady. "I've been waiting a very long time to see you again." James looked between the airline owner and his mother, confusion spreading across his face. "Again? I don't understand." Lisa touched his arm gently. "James, this is Malcolm Carter." The man swallowed visibly, then added what Lisa had left unsaid. "I'm your father." The world seemed to stop for James. He stared at the man, trying to process the words. This couldn't be real. His father was just a faded photo in a drawer, a ghost story, a painful absence. "That's not possible," James said, his voice barely audible. "My father left when I was 2. "Yes," Malcolm nodded, pain evident in his expression. "I did. And there's no excuse that can make that right. But I never stopped thinking about you, about your mother." James felt rooted to the spot, a storm of emotions swirling inside him: confusion, anger, disbelief. "The airline," he managed to say, looking around at the terminal with its Qatar Airways logos. "You own it." Malcolm nodded again. "I started building it just after I left. I thought I needed to create something worthwhile before I could come back. But months turned into years, and his voice trailed off." "And you never came back," James finished, a hardness entering his voice. "Until now," Malcolm said quietly. James turned to his mother. "You knew? About this? About him?" Lisa nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Only for the past month, when he contacted me about arranging this meeting." James thought back to the incident at the airport, how they'd been questioned about belonging in first class. The irony hit him like a physical blow. So at the check-in counter, when they didn't think I belonged in first class. They had no idea whose son they were turning away, Malcolm confirmed, his jaw tightening. "Diane told me what happened. I'm deeply sorry you experienced that, especially on my airline." James didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to run from the building, to pretend this revelation had never happened. Another part, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, felt a pull toward this stranger who called himself his father. "Why now?" James asked, the only question that seemed to matter. "Why after all this time?" Malcolm stepped closer, stopping when he saw James tense up. "Because I finally realized that nothing I've built matters without you and your mother to share it with. The airline, the success, it's all hollow. I told myself I was building it for you, but I never gave you the choice to be part of it." James looked into the man's eyes that, he now realized with a shock, were exactly like his own, and saw raw emotion there. Regret, hope, fear. "The airline that almost turned me away," James said slowly, "is actually mine? Or part mine? As your son?" Malcolm nodded. "If you want it to be. But more importantly, I want to be your father again, if you'll let me try." James stood at the crossroads of his life, staring at the father he'd never known, the empire he'd built, and the future that suddenly looked completely different than it had that morning. Behind him was a lifetime of absence. Ahead was an unknown path with a stranger who shared his blood. "I don't know what to say," James admitted honestly. "You don't have to say anything right now," Malcolm replied. "We have time, if you'll give us that chance." 6 months had passed since that life-changing day in New York. James sat on the rooftop garden of the new Qatar Airways headquarters in Chicago, watching planes take off and land in the distance. So much had changed in such a short time. The first few weeks after meeting Malcolm had been awkward, filled with careful conversations and cautious attempts to bridge 15 years of absence. James had been angry, confused, and curious all at once. They'd spent the weekend in New York as planned, but instead of sightseeing, they talked for hours in Malcolm's penthouse apartment, sometimes arguing, sometimes just listening, sometimes sitting in silence as they processed everything. "Mind if I join you?" Malcolm's voice came from behind him. James nodded, making room on the bench. His relationship with his father was still a work in progress, but they were finding their way. "Big day tomorrow," Malcolm said, loosening his tie as he sat down. "Nervous?" James shrugged. "A little. It's a lot of responsibility." Tomorrow was the grand opening of the James Carver Aviation Academy, built right next to the new headquarters that Malcolm had relocated to Chicago. The academy would provide free aviation training to underprivileged youth from across the city, and James, at just 16, was officially its student director. "You're ready," Malcolm said confidently. "The curriculum you helped design is excellent. The flight simulator you insisted on is better than what most commercial pilots train on." After returning from New York, James had taken time to think about what role, if any, he wanted in his father's company. Malcolm had been patient, never pushing, always making it clear that James owed him nothing. It was James who had finally approached his father with ideas about youth outreach and education. "I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other kids," James had explained. "Not just the incident at the airport, but feeling like certain doors are closed to people who look like me." Malcolm had not only embraced the idea, but had put James in charge of developing it, with appropriate mentorship and support. "Have you decided what to say to him?" James asked now, referring to the gate agent who had questioned his place in first class half a year ago. Malcolm looked surprised. "You still want to include him in the ceremony?" James nodded. "He needs to be there." After the incident, Malcolm had wanted to fire the agent immediately. It was James who had suggested a different approach. Instead of termination, the agent had been required to work directly with James on developing anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff. The experience had transformed not just the agent, but the entire airline's approach to diversity and inclusion. "He made a mistake," James said simply. "But he owned it and helped fix the system that allowed it to happen." Malcolm shook his head in amazement. "You're a better man than I was at your age, maybe better than I am now." "I had a good example in Mom," James replied. "She never taught me to hate people who make mistakes, just to expect them to do better once they knew better." Lisa had adjusted to the changes in their lives with characteristic grace. She had accepted Malcolm's apology, but had been clear that rebuilding trust would take time. She hadn't quit her nursing job, despite Malcolm's offers of financial support, insisting on maintaining her independence. However, she had agreed to move to a nicer apartment closer to James's school, and she and Malcolm were slowly finding their way back to friendship, perhaps more. "How's the new curriculum coming along?" Malcolm asked, changing the subject. James lit up, pulling out his tablet to show his father the latest updates. "We've added a whole section on the history of black aviators. Did you know that Bessie Coleman had to go to France to get her pilot's license because no one would teach her here in America?" Malcolm smiled, watching his son's excitement. This was what he'd missed all those years, not just watching James grow up, but growing with him, learning from him. That conversation was interrupted by Lisa joining them on the roof. "There you two are," she said. "Diane's looking for you both. The final rehearsal for tomorrow's ceremony is starting." As they walked together toward the elevator, Malcolm's phone buzzed with a text. He checked it and grinned. "What is it?" James asked. "The application numbers for the academy," Malcolm replied. "Over 500 kids applied for the first 100 spots. The selection committee has their work cut out for them." "Not really," James said. "Remember, we're not selecting based on test scores or grades. We're looking for passion and potential." As they reached the ground floor, they passed the massive lobby where workers were putting final touches on the academy's dedication plaque. James paused to read the words that would be unveiled tomorrow. "The James Carter Aviation Academy, because the sky belongs to everyone, not just those who look the part." Those words had been James' idea, a reminder of the incident that had brought them together and the change they were committed to creating. Outside the building, a group of teenagers was already gathered, peering through the windows at the flight simulators being installed. James noticed how their faces lit up with possibility, with dreams that suddenly seemed within reach. 1 year ago, he had been a boy with no father, no connection to aviation, and only vague ideas about his future. Now he stood between his parents, watching as the academy bearing his name prepared to open its doors to hundreds of kids just like him. "You know what's funny?" James said as they walked toward the waiting staff. "If that gate agent had just given us our seats without making a fuss, we would have flown to New York, met you there, and none of this would have happened the way it did." Malcolm considered this. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes. And sometimes, Lisa added, linking her arms through both James's and Malcolm's, a family has to get lost before it can find its way home. James looked up at the Carter Airways logo displayed proudly on the building. Below it, in slightly smaller letters, was the company's new slogan that he had helped create. "Not just where you fly, but how you get there matters." It was true for airplanes, for companies, and for families too.